Good morning. Right now, in the harsh desert terrain near Basra, Iraq, there is a highly specialized 10-man combat cell operating completely off the grid.
Yeah, and they're bypassing every traditional militia network in the country, basically taking their orders straight from commanders in Tehran.
Right, while at the exact same time, roughly 3,000 miles away in a highly secure room in Switzerland, diplomats are sitting in tailored suits trying to hammer out a peace framework with the very government that's directing those covert cells.
It is a massive contradiction, and that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm glad you're joining us. Our mission today is, well, it's clarity. We want to completely set aside the sensationalism and the panic and just calmly and professionally analyze the actual facts on the ground.
Exactly. We're looking past the daily noise so we can understand the real architecture of these events because, individual headlines, they often seem totally chaotic.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you zoom out, the actual patterns of statecraft, the military strategy, the regional economics, it all becomes remarkably clear.
Today's the 22nd of June, 2026. And this is our special two-week analysis, officially titled Middle East Crisis Update.
And before we really get into breaking down this intelligence, we should acknowledge our sponsor, ProWave AI.
Right, because this deep dive is actually generated by Stylo News, which is an AI-powered news application that synthesizes just massive amounts of global data into actionable intelligence.
Yeah, and just for some context there, Stylo News is the consumer-facing version of their Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is pretty heavy-duty stuff, right?
Very. It's an enterprise-grade platform built specifically for government agencies, military operations, and global business sectors.
So what that means for you, the listener, is that the analysis you are hearing today utilizes the exact same caliber of intelligence tools and analytical frameworks that actual global decision-makers are relying on at this very moment.
Which is pretty incredible access, honestly.
It really is. Now, today we are tracking a very intricate web of developments across the region, and there are three key strategic lines of analysis we're focusing on.
First, we're looking at Iran and its proxy network, specifically their ability to maintain stability while testing the limits of their military reach.
Second, we're watching the United States and allied Middle Eastern nations and how they're trying to degrade those threats and force a return to diplomacy.
And third, sitting in the center of it all, we are analyzing Israel's challenge.
Right, that multi-front challenge of balancing immediate civilian protection while trying to shape a sustainable peace.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start by looking at the largest systemic actor in this equation, which is Iran.
Yeah, Iran is currently executing what analysts call a highly complex dual-track strategy.
Meaning they're doing two totally different things at once.
Exactly. If we look at the diplomatic track, talks are actively ongoing in Switzerland, and those are being mediated by Qatar and Pakistan.
And the goal there is for the United States and Iran to outline a memorandum of understanding, right? Yes, working toward a broader agreement on regional security and nuclear issues within the next 60 days. It's a very traditional diplomatic pursuit.
But, and this is a huge but, the military posture we are seeing completely contradicts that diplomatic tone.
It's day and night.
Right. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, has essentially declared the Strait of Hormuz closed to non-Iranian shipping.
And they are actively threatening commercial vessels in the area.
Which is a massive escalation. Plus, they've attached these immense geopolitical conditions to the threat, demanding a complete Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon and a U.S. troop withdrawal from the Persian Gulf.
So the contrast is just stark. You have diplomats shaking hands in Europe while naval commanders threaten global shipping lanes in the Gulf.
I have to say, though, I struggle to buy the narrative that this is some grand masterclass in strategy.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, we have a glaring contradiction in the intelligence brief itself. The IRGC warns ships to stay away, claiming the strait is closed, but then the Iranian Foreign Ministry puts out an official statement flatly denying a full closure.
Right, they insist they're fully committed to maritime security.
Exactly. So why are we assuming this is, 4D chess? Are we seeing regime infighting here? Or is this really a calculated strategy? Could it just be a fracturing regime where the military is going rogue and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing?
It's a perfectly valid question, but the intelligence indicators actually point away from regime fragmentation.
Really?
Yeah. Current assessments evaluate Iran's regime stability as medium-high right now. We are just not seeing the credible evidence of elite fracturing or the imminent collapse that usually accompanies a rogue military acting against its own State Department.
Okay, so if they aren't falling apart, what are they doing?
Well, what's fascinating here is that we have to view this contradiction as a deliberate, engineered tactic. It's a strategy of calibrated coercion.
Calibrated coercion. Break down the mechanics of that for us. How does that actually work in practice?
It's all about applying maximum leverage without crossing the threshold of war. Tehran wants to pressure the United States and the Gulf states to gain an advantage in those Swiss negotiations.
Because they desperately want sanctions relief.
Exactly. But they are acutely aware that triggering a direct conventional war with the U.S. or Israel would be absolutely devastating to their regime's survival.
Right, they can't afford a full-scale war.
No, not at all. So the IRGC provides the stick, the overt military threat to global commerce. And meanwhile, the foreign ministry maintains plausible deniability, keeping that diplomatic door open and confusing the international response.
Wow. And this coercion isn't just restricted to the naval domain either. Which brings us back to those covert cells we mentioned at the start of the deep dives. The intelligence highlights a major operational shift on the ground in Iraq.
It does. Between April 20th and May 17th, the IRGC established 3 to 4 covert cells in the desert areas of southern Iraq, specifically near Basra and Samawa.
But wait, Iran already funds massive established proxy militias in Iraq. Why go through the trouble of building entirely new covert units?
Because traditional militias have political wings. They hold territory, they have domestic Iraqi agendas, and quite frankly, they leak information.
So they're too messy.
Exactly. What the IRGC has built in Basra and Samawa are highly specialized, sterile units. We are talking about small cells of roughly 10 elite Shiite fighters each.
That's incredibly small.
It is, and that's the point. They completely bypass the traditional militia command structures and report directly to Iranian commanders. It gives Tehran absolute control and maximum deniability.
And they're already active, right?
Very active. These specific cells have already launched at least 7 drone attacks targeting military and strategic sites in the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia.
So if Iran is successfully hiding these elite, untraceable cells in the Iraqi desert, it's a might easily threaten the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, it completely changes the math for the diplomats sitting at that table in Switzerland.
It places immense, almost unbearable pressure on the diplomatic process, and the intelligence indicates that the negotiating table is buckling under that pressure.
Yeah, independent reporting shows the diplomatic environment is incredibly fragile right now. We even have reports of the Iranian delegation walking out of the talks entirely.
And those reports cite threats attributed to former U.S. President Trump as the catalyst for the walkout.
Right, and this collapse in dialogue puts a massive spotlight on the mediators themselves, specifically Qatar and Pakistan.
Qatar's political exposure is particularly severe right now. They are trying to broker peace with Iran while simultaneously hosting massive United States military assets like the Al Udeid Air Base.
Which is a very tricky tightrope to walk.
It makes them incredibly vulnerable, and this physical risk was underscored recently by unconfirmed reports of an explosion in the Doha industrial area.
Now, to be perfectly clear with our listeners, the intelligence brief notes, those reports are too weakly sourced to definitively label as an Iranian strike.
That is correct. We have to maintain strict objectivity there. But in the realm of international deterrence, the mere rumor of an explosion in a mediator's capital serves a purpose.
It sends a message about vulnerability.
Precisely. When you host an American airbase, a mysterious blast in your industrial district isn't just noise. It's a very stark reminder of the physical risks associated with your geopolitical alliances.
And this vulnerability extends even further south, down toward Yemen. The intelligence notes that while the Houthi threat to Israel hasn't registered as immediately active in the last 24 hours, there's a deep concern over a massive logistical shift happening in the background.
Yeah, intelligence agencies are closely monitoring the development of a two-way weapons corridor.
A two-way corridor.
Yes, connecting Houthi networks in Yemen with militant groups in the Horn of Africa, moving illicit arms directly through the Gulf of Aden.
Explain why that specific corridor matters. Why is moving weapons across the Gulf of Aden such a critical escalation?
It's really about expanding operational depth. Think of it this way. If the Houthis are confined to Yemen, their launch points are relatively predictable.
Right, you know where to look.
But by establishing a two-way corridor to the Horn of Africa, they are functionally expanding the geography of the entire conflict. They can source weapons from new markets, hide assets across the water, and potentially launch attacks from entirely new vectors that regional defense systems just aren't optimized to track.
You know, this brings up a critical flaw in how we think about modern deterrence. It's like, well, It's like trying to hold a door shut while water seeps in under the
That's
cracks.
a great way to put it.
The United States has the massive state-on-state firepower to destroy any conventional military target on Earth. But that weapon is completely useless against a decentralized swarm, a 10-man drone cell in the Iraqi desert, a smuggling skiff in the Gulf of Aden, or a proxy militia launching cheap rockets.
The U.S. is successfully deterring overt state-on-state war, but the decentralized proxy harassment is still just flooding the zone. And that analogy captures the precise mechanism of asymmetric warfare. Traditional militaries are built to fight other traditional militaries. They struggle immensely against stateless networks that don't care about holding territory and have no conventional infrastructure to destroy.
And we want to bring this back to you, the listener, because this is why these seemingly distant maritime maneuvers directly impact your life. The Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea are the fundamental arteries of global commerce.
They absolutely are. When the IRGC threatens the strait or the Houthis expand weapons corridors near the Gulf of Aden, marine insurance premiums skyrocket overnight.
And commercial shipping companies are forced to reroute massive cargo vessels entirely around the continent of Africa.
Which adds weeks to transit times. It burns millions of dollars in extra fuel.
Right, and those costs are not just absorbed by the shipping companies out of the goodness of their hearts. They are passed directly down the supply chain, which translates to global market instability, inflation, and ultimately higher prices for everyday goods on your store shelves.
The economic shockwaves are immediate, and they are global.
But while the Gulf represents this broader regional deterrence failure, the kinetic reality on the ground is playing out daily in Israel. Israel is currently managing a multi-front war, primarily focused on active combat in Gaza and Lebanon.
Let's look at the facts on the ground in Gaza. The Israeli military is maintaining its operational tempo, and they state their aim is permanently dismantling Hamas's military and governing capabilities.
And we are reporting this completely impartially based on the intelligence provided. The latest intelligence confirms that Israeli operations recently killed at least 11 Palestinians across Gaza City and various refugee camps.
Crucially, the Israeli military stated this included 2 targeted members of the Hamas military wing.
Right, Hussein Qadra and Mohammed Farah.
And the elimination of those specific targets is highly significant because it highlights the dual nature of this war. It's not just about degrading physical weapon caches.
It's about the money.
Exactly. Qadra and Farah allegedly facilitated a vast financial network responsible for transferring over $170 million to militant groups inside Gaza.
Which honestly begs the question, how does a $170 million financial network function inside a territory that has been under heavy blockade for years?
It requires a highly sophisticated shadow economy. Militant groups utilize a complex combination of international shell companies, unregulated cryptocurrency transfers, physical cash smuggling, and traditional hawala networks.
Hawala networks, those are the informal methods of transferring money without moving physical currency, right?
That's right. And Israel's strategy here is based on the premise that you can't just destroy the rocket launchers. You absolutely must sever the financial arteries that pay for the parts, the smugglers, and the operatives. Targeting the accountants is viewed as just as vital as targeting the commanders.
However, this military strategy operates within a deeply complex and polarized media and humanitarian landscape. Because during these recent strikes, an Al Jazeera journalist named Ahmed Wisha was also killed.
Yes. And the Israeli military subsequently released statements accusing Wisha of being an active Hamas operative, asserting that their strike was aimed at a legitimate military target.
But Al Jazeera has strongly and categorically denied this claim. They condemned the action as a targeted assassination of a journalist and a direct attack on press freedom.
We are presenting these competing realities exactly as they are reported in the intelligence.
Because it's vital to see both sides. On one side, the Israeli military emphasizes an absolute national security imperative, neutralizing what they view as existential threats hiding within civilian infrastructure.
And on the other side, international organizations, media outlets, and humanitarian groups point to the severe civilian death toll and the widespread destruction, demanding immediate ceasefires and expanded aid access.
Both of those narratives are deeply, deeply entrenched, and that entrenchment is equally visible on Israel's northern border.
The diplomatic efforts to secure a ceasefire in southern Lebanon are, by all analytical measures, failing. The conflict is escalating rapidly.
In fact, Hezbollah itself has publicly described the current period as the most dangerous phase of the war so far.
The casualty figures definitely reflect a
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has publicly called for an end to foreign interference and demanded a restoration of true Lebanese sovereignty.
because the internal stability of Lebanon is crumbling. Since Hezbollah fully engaged in this conflict back in October 2023, Lebanon has faced an unprecedented economic and social collapse.
And we are seeing the mechanisms of that collapse begin to erode Hezbollah's traditional base of power, aren't we?
We are. The intelligence specifically mentions a group called the Forum of Shiite Lebanese. This is a group actively advocating for Lebanese sovereignty and a sharp reduction in Iranian
It
influence.
feels like a massive shift.
It's a critical political indicator. You see, Hezbollah relies heavily on the Shiite population for its political legitimacy and its operational cover.
Right.
But when you have 20% of the entire Lebanese population displaced, many of them from predominantly Shiite areas in the south, the cost of this conflict becomes incredibly personal.
When your homes are destroyed and your economy is in ruins, the narrative of resistance begins to look like a liability to the very people Hezbollah claims to protect.
Exactly. So we've established the physical facts on the ground across these multiple fronts. Now let's shift our focus to how the global public and key decision makers are actually perceiving these events.
Because in modern conflict, public perception directly constrains or enables military policy. Here's where it gets really interesting. The intelligence brief includes a comprehensive sentiment analysis of global social media, pulling specific data from X, formerly Twitter.
And the data reveals a highly polarized digital landscape.
Highly polarized. Roughly 60% of the discourse skews anti-Israel or pro-Palestine. This demographic heavily cites the humanitarian crises, the civilian casualty numbers, and amplifies claims of war crimes.
Then you have about 25% of the discourse that is firmly pro-Israel. They focus on Israel's legal and moral right to self-defense, emphasizing the continued aggression from Hamas and Hezbollah.
And the remaining 15% attempts to maintain a neutral, factual reporting stance.
Beyond the immediate kinetic conflict in Gaza and Lebanon, the data also captures widespread global alarm regarding the IRGC's maneuvers in the Gulf.
Yeah, there is acute anxiety among the general public regarding the risk of oil disruptions and the potential for a localized war to spill over into a regional catastrophe.
When you synthesize all of this, the military posturing, the failing diplomacy, the public sentiment, you are left with primary decision makers who are operating on entirely different, incompatible realities.
Impartially looking at the courses of action, the divides are profound. Israel views its current military campaign not as a choice, but as an absolute necessity for state survival.
Right. They believe they must systematically dismantle the military and financial threats on their borders, and they will not accept any ceasefire that allows Hamas or Hezbollah to rebuild.
Conversely, Hamas and Hezbollah view their course of action strictly through the lens of resistance and continued existence.
They are actively resisting all calls for disarmament. They view any long-term ceasefire that requires them to give up their military infrastructure as a total surrender of their political sovereignty.
And caught right in the middle, you have the United States and the Gulf states. Their primary course of action is pure containment.
They are desperately utilizing a mix of military deterrence and the fragile Swiss diplomatic talks to try and prevent a multi-front war from detonating into a region-wide conflict.
A conflict that could completely cripple the global economy. Given these entrenched positions, the situation is incredibly volatile. So, what are the concrete, specific intelligence indicators our listeners should be watching for in the coming days to signal a major shift?
There are 3 specific warning signs to monitor. First, watch for any movement of transporter erector launchers in Iran.
What are those for the folks at home?
These are the mobile missile platforms that allow forces to drive a ballistic missile into position, fire it, and immediately relocate before they can be targeted. If the IRGC begins dispersing these units out of their garrisons, it's a clear sign they are preparing for major kinetic action.
Okay, what about in the maritime domain? What should we look out for there?
Monitor the Strait of Hormuz for unusual concentrations of fast attack craft near the Iranian port city of Bandar Abbas. A sudden swarming exercise would indicate preparations to actively block shipping lanes.
And the third indicator.
Watch the diplomatic track. A complete, verified collapse of the talks in Switzerland, accompanied by public statements from regime leadership authorizing retaliation, would signal the end of the calibrated coercion phase and the beginning of severe escalation.
It is a very precarious balance. We are essentially watching the limits of global diplomacy play out in real time.
We are, and that actually raises a broader, overarching thought I want to leave with the listener today to really mull over.
What's on?
Consider the totality of the mechanisms we have discussed in this analysis. We are looking at a $170 million illicit financial network operating in the shadows of a blockade. We are tracking covert drone cells directed by foreign commanders, completely bypassing national armies. And we are watching massive narrative battles being fought and won not on physical battlefields, but on social media algorithms.
It really suggests that the fundamental nature of how wars are fought and how they are funded is permanently changing.
Exactly. And the profound question is whether traditional state-to-state diplomacy is still viable. Are diplomats in tailored suits sitting across a polished table in Switzerland actually equipped to secure lasting peace in a world that is increasingly decentralized, algorithmic, and driven by stateless proxy networks?
That's a great point.
The tools of the 20th century are really struggling to solve the warfare of the 21st century.
That is a critical perspective to keep in mind as these events unfold. So what does this all mean for you?
Well, it means that relying on fragmented headlines is just no longer enough. Staying accurately and deeply informed is critical.
And that is exactly where our sponsor comes in. Stylo News is available right now as both a mobile and a computer app. You can download it today to customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs.
And it draws directly from hundreds of traditional global news sources, as well as platforms like X, synthesizing all that data to give you the unfiltered facts you need to understand the broader architecture of current events. We highly encourage you to take control of your information diet. Subscribe to Stylo News for AI-powered news on demand.
You can find them right now at www.stylonews.com.
It's an essential tool for clarity.
It really is. And with that, I'm going to drop the professional anchor persona for just a moment to sincerely thank you for joining us today. This is incredibly heavy, complex material, but breaking it down and understanding the why and the how together makes navigating the world just a little less daunting.
We always want to know what you are curious about, so please request topics for future deep dives, and don't forget to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms.
Remember, the geopolitical landscape is constantly shifting. Stay curious, stay informed, and we will see you next time.